Welcome to this special virtual event for Descended from the Promised Land, the legacy of Black Wall Street. You will see a QR code there on your screen that will allow you to learn about the film and its impact campaign that draws a century-long thread from the Tulsa Race Massacre to the present, exploring the lingering economic, psychological, and emotional impacts that have undermined the rebuilding of the once thriving community. The Film and National Social Impact Campaign launched last May in recognition and remembrance of 100 years since the Tulsa Race Massacre. It is my pleasure to moderate today's panel on behalf of Odyssey Impact and Transform Films. If you're wondering, who is Transform Film and who's Odyssey Impact? Transform Films is a Peabody Award-winning film company that produced Descended from the Promised Land. And Odyssey Impact is a nonprofit organization that is leading the National Social Impact Campaign for the film. I want to respectfully acknowledge the Lenape people who have stewarded the land for the generations on which Odyssey Impact is located in New York City. My name is Reverend Dr. Stephanie Marie Crumpton, and I'm the Associate Professor of Practical Theology at McCormick Theological Seminary. I welcome you, and I've had the fortune to be intimately involved in the development of the Social Impact Campaign as an advisor and consultant. Today's conversation will focus on themes uplifted within the Film and Impact Campaign, and you'll hear from the descendants as well as those who have joined the Impact Campaign and used the film as a tool for community action. Please note, per Odyssey's commitment to accessibility, you should see a live transcript button below to access closed captioning of this event. And today we are joined by our American Sign Language interpreters, Avery Gordon and Marianne Gutierrez from Pro Bono ASL. Thank you for being with us, Avery and Marianne. As we move into this commemoration of what we've been able to accomplish with this beautiful film, we recognize that as we have this conversation today, it comes on the heels of another shooting in Tulsa in which many people lost their lives. We raise this here in Odyssey Impact's conversation about this film to acknowledge how this film is a part of bringing history to light so we can recognize that as we deal with the challenges of today, they sit on top of the challenges that occurred before them. But not only do they sit on top of those challenges, but also the resilience of the people who survived those spaces and the generations thereafter. So as we enter this conversation about today's work, we recognize and acknowledge that the work is ongoing. On May 31st, 2022, we marked the 101st anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre, and we are honored to host this special event to reflect on such a pivotal moment. Now we are pleased to share the trailer for the documentary film, Descended from the Promised Land, the legacy of Black Wall Street.
There's this quote by John Hope Franklin. There are two ways which whites destroy a Black community. One is by building a freeway through it. The other is by changing its zoning laws.
The cutting off of the legacy, the cutting off of intergenerational wealth. That is what the 1921 massacre did to the Black community. And still some people were resilient enough after that to rebuild. And that was destroyed by redistricting, rezoning, eminent domain, taking property from businesses. I mean, that's what happened to my great-grandmother's building. The city bought it because everything around it was being gentrified. Kind of the common theme, unfortunately, that's happened in a lot of the Black communities across the United States.
We will never have a real scale of all the businesses and all the companies of Black Wall Street when it was absolutely at its best. Black Wall Street went on for miles and miles. Now it's a little block. There are Black-owned businesses on that street, but it's been gentrified. My sister and I talk about this all the time. What if the massacre didn't happen at all? Would this have been a business that kept going in our family? Could it have been a legacy? The possibilities are absolutely endless. Would Black Wall Street had an influence on the entire nation?
Such a powerful movie. The film is so powerful. One of the most powerful things about the film are the questions and the ways in which those questions move us to contemplation and prayerfully to action. At this time, Reverend Dr. Robert Turner, the former pastor of the historic Vernon AME Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, will lead us in prayer via video.
Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. Robert Turner, sitting here in the basement of historic Vernon African Methodist Episcopal Church that survived the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. Won't you pray with me? Dear God, our majestic King, we desire to live free in the land where our ancestors were brought here to be slaves. Merciful Master, liberate us from the shackles of sin and the misery of mayhem. Great wise God, teach us how to love ourselves in a world which disdains our existence and appropriates our culture. Fearless champion, our battle axe. Fight our battles against corrupt politicians and overzealous police who fear and retaliate against the Black bodies they were sworn to protect. My all-seeing friend, Jesus, please be with us when we feel alone or in the minority at work, school, or the restaurant. Help us to feel your presence and see your power in a society that seeks to isolate and exploit us. Our most intelligent creator, create more foot soldiers to wage war against enemies of peace, truth, and love. Bless us with the stamina to walk around the walls of Jericho until they fall down. Give us the grace to experience your love and know your wisdom. In Jesus' name, I pray. Amen.
At this time, we welcome our panelists to join the discussion. We'll ask them to say a quick hello, and their biographies will be shared in the chat to provide additional background. I'd like to introduce to you all Michelle Blocker, the descendant of Leona Bell Corbett.
Hello.
Next, I'd like to introduce to you Jacqueline Blocker, descendant of Leona Bell Corbett, who is also the sister of Michelle Blocker.
Hello, and thank you, Dr. Crumpton. Thank you, Odyssey Impact. Thank you, Transform Films, and thank you to all of our participants today. Before we move on, Dr. Crumpton, I'd like to share a brief land acknowledgement. I want to take time to acknowledge the land that my sister and I are speaking from. Where we reside in Tulsa is the ancestral land of the Muskogee Creek Nation. As proud descendants of the Seminole, we are grateful to be able to live and work on this land. We recognize that a land acknowledgement is a mere small step in showing appreciation, that more work must be done to address the injustices the people of sovereign nations have faced and continue to face as a result of colonization. We acknowledge and honor the history and active resistance and resilience of Indigenous people. And I just want to say this in acknowledging people that are joining from across the state and the nation. And I welcome all of you to visit nativeland.ca to acknowledge the land on your own. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. And finally, we'd like to introduce to you Byron Crenshaw, the descendant of Lula, John, and Dado Williams.
Hello.
Welcome.
It's an honor to be here.
It's good to see all three of you all. What we do recognize is that while you see the three of them, they had an amazing partner in a filmmaker named Nayla Jefferson. Nayla was not able to join us today. She is actually in the middle of continuing her awesome work on social impact work. She's filming a commercial, but has graciously offered this special video message for this event.
Thank you all for coming out and reflecting with us on the social impact of Descended from the Promised Land. They probably already introduced me by now, but I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Nayla Jefferson, and I had the honor of directing this film. Going into planning the film, we had a lot of goals, but our main goal was to allow the descendants of those who lived and worked on Black Wall Street an opportunity to reclaim the narrative of the Tulsa Race Massacre. We can see during this moment in time that there are groups and efforts to disappear and erase the Black experience in America. And we find it really important to fight against that. So thank you to Byron and Michelle and Jacqueline and your families for helping us in that effort, for allowing us in to your families and for giving us an opportunity to tell your stories. It really is a gift. The film has been able to participate in film festivals, I'm proud to say, including Doc NYC, Martha's Vineyard African American Film Festival, and the American Black Film Festival. And the film actually is now available on American Airlines flights through the American Black Film Festival. We're a part of their short film series. So this story will no longer be covered up. This story is not going to be erased. This story is transcending Oklahoma. It's transcending the US. It is global. American Airlines flights see 2 million customers. And so we have a captive audience that can lock into our film and hear the real story of what happened during the Tulsa Race Massacre.
Thank you so much, Nayla. Since the Impact campaign for the film launched last May, the film has screened in faith and secular communities, including houses of worship, colleges, organizations, and corporations. And just as you heard from Nayla, it is showing on American Airlines flights. We have heard that the tally for how many people who have seen the film is that it has played over 40,000 times from airline passengers across the country on American Airlines. So we are definitely excited about the partnership with American Airlines that continues to share this story. Well, let's dive into the first question for our panel. Michelle, Jacqueline, Byron, you all have worked really hard with Nayla to bring the beautiful story of your ancestors' lives in the community called Black Wall Street to life for us. As descendants of this powerful community, what did you learn while sharing and documenting this story? And was there anything particular from your ancestors that stands out as you continue to fight for recognition and restoration?
I, first of all, want to say thank you to Odyssey Impact for having us once again, and to you, Dr. Crumpton. It's always a pleasure to work with you. I just have one aspect I wanted to talk about. During the documentary, walking in the area where our great-grandmother's business used to be, that part was pretty heartbreaking because my mother was able to point out various businesses that did reside at that time. And to look at it now that it's residential, that part of that documentary, when we're looking out into that open field, that always kind of sticks with me because there has still not been any type of rebuilding in that area. And you know, that it would be wonderful if that would be healing at that point, but it's hard to have healing without acknowledgement. And I feel like we are headed towards that.
Mm, mm,
I absolutely second that. And also, I want to say shout out to Naila for how intentionally she captured everything that really speaks to the heart of this film. It felt like, for me personally, this was such a profoundly deep healing experience, and it's hard not to get emotional just talking about it. Where it was the first time I ever heard my great grandfather's voice. It was I felt like I really understood myself through it so deeply, and understood my family, and I feel like us being Black in America, so much of our identity is so caught in this blur of trying to make sense of all the erasure that's happened to our culture throughout all the years. So the fact that we can just reclaim it despite all of this effort to push us down has been empowering, and I hope it empowers others in the same way.
Yeah, I just want a huge plus one to everything that Byron and Michelle said. There was something like when we first started this journey, there was something that Byron said about this process helped him kind of understand like the family dynamics better. I don't think he used the word secrecy, but it was kind of like this private, we're very private about not wanting to share. And that resonated with me so much. And I think about that because, as Byron said, it helps explain kind of our resilience, like why I just can't stop and almost, like, and that's not always a good thing. But it does help, it has helped me understand better myself, my family, like intergenerational trauma and those things is real. And going through this actually was part of that. My sister and I talked about this before. We were so thankful that you were showing the whole film before because we get emotional every time we see it. And so then we have to come on and try and get together for that panel. But even watching the little clip a little bit, like that part with my mother and sighing at the end, it's just like, there's so much in that sigh that even my sister and I will never know. So it's like, it's been healing, but also like painful to think about the what ifs. So I'm thankful for this opportunity. I'm so thankful that this is being captured because this part of history will not be erased, and it cannot be erased because the purpose of history is so that we do not repeat the same mistakes that have been made in the past. And if we erase history, then we are doomed to make the same mistakes. So I am so glad that this is captured and that there is a showing of another side of Black America and the thriving and the wealth and the beauty that our families and our communities created at that time. I hope I answered the question. I feel like I went off on a tangent, but.
I don't think you went off on a tangent. I think you all, each of you, not just you, Jacqueline, but each of you all spoke to the fact that this is not just some abstract concept or some history kind of lesson that's tucked nicely in between the pages of a book. It's a live story. It's a history that is ever present. And so I would like to ask just a little bit about the process of deciding how you would tell the story. So there's the work of the director who directs you, right? And does the technical pieces and is responsible for collecting the narrative. But when it comes to you all as descendants, what was the process for you all around deciding how you would capture these stories and how you would maintain your family relationships, even as you're telling really difficult stories? So how was it for you all to decide how you want this story to be known and shared? Because there are lots of different ways in which, and lots of different perspectives, which is also why it was necessary for this film to be made, right? But can you say a bit about how you decided which stories to tell and how to tell them, especially when it comes to shining light on the power and resilience of these communities in the face of nearly insurmountable odds?
Well, I have to give all the credit to the director in that. I feel like the way in which she approached us, it was just very natural, the way the stories came out and sharing our experience. They did their research before, and then we were able to fill in some of those personal gaps just with the personal experience with our family members. But truly, that's all credit to her and her work. It didn't even seem. I didn't remember half the quotes that were in the documentary. Like when I saw it, I didn't even remember. I was like, oh, I said that? Wow. So I really do think that it was the credit of building that trust, because all of this is us trusting this story that was untold, and did a phenomenal job in creating a safe space of trust for us to share that story. And for my sister, and well, I'll speak for me, for both of us, I think, but I'll speak for myself. It was really important for us to highlight the fact that our very strong great-grandmother, Black Indigenous woman, was a property owner at that time, when it still is an amazing accomplishment even in this day and time. So I think for us, it was definitely wanting Leona Corbett's name to stay there, for people to know that this strong woman accomplished something like that back then during difficult times and was thriving.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say the exact same thing. It was definitely the director. She didn't silence us. She didn't give us barriers. When she says, in previous panels and when she's been interviewed, she's like, it was their story. And she really stuck to that. We had no barriers. And if we did not want to talk about something, she didn't press. It was really, we got to be the voices of our ancestors. And she allowed that.
Yeah, I'm thankful for how I feel like a lot of times when you hear about the race massacre, a lot of times you hear about all these numbers and all this property damage, and it's so statistical and kind of inhuman in a way. And the way Naila set it up, it like they were saying, like it gave us this platform to not have to feel like we're on some CNN talk show for 4 minutes spewing out facts. It was more like we can open our hearts up and we can show the deep humanizing feelings of want and community and pain that was really felt by our ancestors, and that we continue to feel the echoes of today.
As I hear all of you speak and remember the video, the different, just looking at the video the small piece that we showed earlier, and hearing you speak about, there was this woman who owned land during this particular time when the general narrative has not one about ownership, about Black ownership, but is one about servitude, danger, pain, risk. That's the prevailing narrative. And while those are realities during that time, there is also the reality of Black wellness, Black wealth. One of my favorite images in the videos from the film is the image of a man standing there next to a plane that he apparently owns. This is his plane. And when I watched that, I thought, well, where was he going? And the answer is anywhere he wanted, because it was his plane, right? And so one of the most endearing things to me about the film is how it expands the narrative, which is very much what happens when the people about whom a story is written are the ones who are writing and telling and showing the story. You all did an amazing job in collaboration with Naila. This is one of the gifts of the moving image and the power of film. At this time, we want to actually move towards a bit of conversation with someone who specializes in that. We'd like to share a video message of support from Khalil Green, Gen Z historian and digital educator, speaker, and influencer.
Hi, I'm Khalil Green. I'm also known as the Gen Z historian, and I participated in this Impact campaign. I worked on this campaign by uplifting the film to my over 600,000 followers across social media to see. I was able to summarize the stories and the information in the film into a 1-minute video as well as an educational slideshow. My goal was to ignite my followers' interest in learning about what happened after the Tulsa Race Massacre, and I directed all of them to watch the film after seeing my content. The film means a lot to me because I'm a huge history buff, and I studied history, specifically the history of social change and social movements, in college at Yale University. I also really enjoyed the film because we got to hear directly from the families of the victims impacted by the massacre, and these families serve to recount primary source information that was conveyed to them from their ancestors. And while I knew a lot about what happened during the Tulsa Race Massacre, I'd never heard as many stories or seen as many pictures of what occurred both before and after the tragic event. Both me and my audience have so much to take away from this film. Keep up the great work, Odyssey, and thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this project.
600,000 followers. He has used his voice to join in the work of making these stories real, present, and actively engaging as an opportunity for a whole new generation to become involved. Khalil, we appreciate your work so very much. Part of what he's contributing to is the preservation of history. This work is about preserving history, but it's also about naming and the subsequent economic and political implications for Greenwood and Tulsa's future. One of the things that really caught my attention after viewing the film was the fact that the deaths and the corralling of residents that we learn about in the film had initially been named a riot, when in fact it was not. It was a massacre. Can one of you speak to what you've seen as the long-term economic impact of naming an event like this a riot versus a massacre? And what, if any, impact does it have that a sitting president, President Biden, has publicly referred to it as a massacre? Publicly, and I would say accurately, referred to it as a massacre.
Is this the one I'm picking? Yes. Okay, well, the difference between calling it a riot and a massacre is a riot implies that there were two parties involved in it and there was two conflicts, versus a massacre when a group descends upon innocent people that are doing nothing but merely going through their daily lives and tasks. To phrase it as a riot allows the state or the city or municipal or whomever to hands off, we're not responsible. We had nothing to do with this. Versus a massacre when you have individuals being deputized by the city to be able to go in and attack innocent people again who are just, and take their property on top of that. So when there is a taking of properties, then there is restitution. You can go through the legal processes of restitution in order for those individuals to be able to rebuild and reclaim what was wrongfully stolen from them. However, as a riot, it was just, it was a fight between two groups, property was damaged and things were lost. So it has a huge implication on how things are approached, legally. And also, I think from a historical standpoint, if you don't learn the right history, then you're assuming that there was some type of fight or conflict when it was a massacre. Having it changed, I truthfully believe the only reason why it changed here locally in Tulsa is because there was so much national attention on this and people uncovered the history of it. I don't know if that been changed because people have been trying to do this internally for decades. So I do believe the national attention with the Centennial that happened a year ago is what forced that change into being a massacre. It is good that now that people are properly doing it, but to me, it's like, it's too late. Like the people that really benefited from hearing that have passed along. There's 3 living descendants left. So it's almost like they were waiting till it was too late to acknowledge, oh yes, your trauma is real and we did massacre your community. So it is good to have that acknowledgement, but it impacted people's ability to have restitution, financial restitution, so there'll be the proper legal processes. And just from a historical mental standpoint, I think the framing for Blacks here growing up not knowing the truth, I think it's harmful.
I was just gonna piggyback off that. She kind of defined it, but I'm just coming from a storytelling background and educationally. How many times do you hear, oh, a riot broke out on the street, a riot broke out after a game? Well, you change it to massacre, and that makes people really want to know, well, what caused this massacre? Literally words, the way people use words really has impact. Educationally, I think more people would have known about this because it would have been considered a massacre. But a riot, it trivializes exactly what it was. And then it goes on, and then somehow the impact of really what it was, it just becomes more trivial and out of people's mouths. And then that story is not told. It already was silenced, but to negate it with the whole, it was a riot. Well, if you hear that, oh, riots break out all the time. So educationally, it was definitely, I feel, purposefully trivialized.
Yeah, it really feels like a part of a broader misrepresentation of our actual ugliness of white supremacy in America, where it feels like we have the Tulsa Race Massacre being painted as a riot. We have things that are intentionally co-opted, like Black Lives Matter, well, All Lives Matter. So it's like we see this time and time again through different events in our history. And even though I remember growing up, the way I learned about the race massacre, it was very much through the grapevine, and the way that they even presented it at my historically Black school by a white teacher was very much watered down. And it's the same thing with like the tale of indigenous rights in Oklahoma. It's the same thing with even how, like, let's say like slavery in general. I remember learning growing up. So it just feels heartbreaking to feel the pattern keep continuing this way. And I think it says something about the inner values of America if we know that. I think deep down, white people know that they need to talk about it because of the way white supremacy is so blatant and glaring in America. So they know no matter how hard they can't erase it, so they try and minimize, you know.
Language matters. I think what I'm hearing from you all, that clearly it's clear to see the economic impact because of how language is used as a vehicle to either access rights and resources or not. But I'm also really aware of how you all bring up the matter of identity, the impact of the identity of folks, of Black folks who grew up in the community, not clear about what the history was and what that then means for their sense of personhood, ownership, and community, and ownership of the community. Thank you all so much for working with us on that one. We want to expand the conversation to invite the voices of others who join this powerful work of recovery and recognition. I'd like to welcome first Reverend Vincent M. Jones, Jr., the pastor of Tabernacle Baptist Church in Knoxville, Tennessee, and he is also an Odyssey Impact Fellow alum. Reverend Jones.
Hello, everyone. I hope and pray that all is well with you. I'm excited about being in on this conversation. Just one moment as I share my screen. All right, so I am a Odyssey Impact Fellow and an alum as well. And we had an awesome opportunity to partner with Odyssey Impact in regards to sharing this profound story in the community of Knoxville, Tennessee, which I am serving in this historically African-American community that's facing gentrification and urban renewal as well. So in this, we invited some conversation partners as well. We invited Reverend Dr. Charles Lomax. He serves from the mayor's office in the city of Knoxville as the director of community empowerment. He's also a son of Tabernacle Baptist Church as well, and he pastors a local church within the area. And we also partnered with Reverend Renee Kessler. She is the director of the Beck Culture Exchange Center, which is the hub of African American history in East Tennessee. She also serves as the associate pastor at the Mount Calvary Baptist Church, which is also right around the corner and is being impacted by displacement as well. And both of these individuals, they serve on a new initiative from the mayor's office regarding the African American Equity Task Force. It's a $100 million task force in regards regards to trying to right the wrongs, if you will, regarding gentrification and urban renewal historically. And then last but certainly not least, we had the opportunity to invite Deacon Larry Johnson. He's a longtime member of Tabernacle, and he's also one of the descendants from this historic African-American community known as the Bottom, right here in Knoxville, Tennessee. And we were able to put together a conversation regarding what happened. As many of you all know, in the summer of 1919, there were massacres and riots all throughout the country. But here in Knoxville was a brother by the name of Maurice Mays. There were some discretions. They say that something happened between him and a white young lady, and they end up breaking into the jail, and they ended up dragging him out of the jail, and they end up not only killing him, but a lot of individuals as well. And this started the legacy of displacement within Knoxville. And in 1949, we know the Housing Act in 1949 by the Truman administration ended up decimating this area in Knoxville, Tennessee, known as the Bottom. And there was a powerful quote by John Hope Franklin that was lifted up in the film. They said there's two ways that you can destroy a Black community. And one way is to have a highway built through it. And another way is also to have zoning laws to change as well. So we did a documentary regarding this film. And as you can see in the background from this film, this is the highway that cuts right through this historic African-American community. And there's also concerns about a baseball stadium that's going to be built where once this community used to thrive in as well. And in this community called the Bottom, over 2,700 structures were removed, over 15 churches were displaced as well, and over 107 Black businesses were displaced from these changes in policy as well. So we definitely thank you all for the opportunity to bring this film to the city of Knoxville. And we had a moment to tour the Beck and talk about urban renewal. We also had a moment just to bring the entire community together. We had nonprofit organizations, individuals from the mayor's office, as well as other churches to come together and just see the film. And thanks to Odyssey Impact, we were able to utilize some of the tools and resources in regards to a pre-survey and a post-survey. So it made a very engaging dialogue. There were plenty of tears, but in particular from the voices of the descendants, it gave an opportunity for healing to actually start within our community. And it was a full circle moment for me. Pre-pandemic, a few years ago, thanks to Odyssey, I had the opportunity to attend the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference, and I was able to meet Dr. Mindy Thomas Fulleylove that talked about the trauma and talked about the root shock and what does it mean to have gentrification and how that impacts the community as well. And I've laid out the plans regarding the baseball stadium that is going to literally sit on top of this historic African-American community. So here goes a brief picture in regards to the film and everyone engaging and asking questions. And it was just a very meaningful film that resonated with us all. And there is a scholar, a womanist scholar by the name of Dr. Evelyn Parker that talks about the importance of having emancipatory hope. And I just didn't want this movie to be something that was viewed, but I wanted to be something that we embodied and people not to become passive recipients of the film. So we did a documentary and allowed people to engage not only in the movie, but to share in the story of telling of how they have been impacted motivated by urban renewal and gentrification, but also what they plan to do in regards to being their own agents of liberation within their community as well. And we're so thankful for the panelists that were able to take part in this discussion. We had college students from Carson Newman University and University Tennessee engage in the dialogue. And the very next day, during a prayer vigil to reduce gun violence in the area, the mayor of Knoxville, India Kincannon, as you see on the right of your screen, she heard about the film and wanted to learn more about Black Wall Street and want to hear the story. And so we've been partnering with different faith communities and nonprofit organizations and working together to lift up our voice and continue to make sure that the legacy of displacement does not happen again within the city of Knoxville. Thank you all so much for the opportunity to listen to your story and to be able to participate. And we're so grateful for you all.
Reverend Jones, thank you so much for your powerful witness of how you all have taken what was begun with this film and taking it down to what it means to put boots on the ground there in Knoxville. Amazing work. Again, a powerful reflection of how this work is not only about Greenwood and Tulsa, but about Black existence, recognition, and restoration. Thank you so much for the ways in which you and your community have taken the cues from this film and joined the community of Greenwood and Tulsa as they forge forward for what is right. Thank you so much. As we continue to expand the conversation by bringing others in, I'd like to introduce Reverend Dr. Velda Love, the Minister of Racial Justice in the United Church of Christ, who brought the film to the United Church of Christ denomination earlier this year. Welcome, Reverend Dr. Love. Can you tell us a little bit about how things have been going?
Yes, thank you. It is good to see Jacqueline and Michelle and Byron again. It's also good to see you, Dr. Crumpton. We have featured Descendants from the Promised Land on our website for our campaign, Join the Movement Toward Racial Justice. And through that particular storytelling opportunity, we've been able to engage with our congregations and our local churches what it means to tell the truth. As an educator and a cultural historian, my role as the Minister of Racial Justice and the lead for this campaign is to also, how do we get our history? And so to educate local churches on the history of Tulsa and where Greenwood, where this community is today. And so we have invited those local congregations to not just view the documentary, but also to participate in local communal conversations on healing and transformation. The work doesn't end with just conversations. We are encouraging our local churches, our clergy, and our lay people to be active in terms of activism around injustice everywhere. But we want them to particularly pay attention to the stories that come out of the massacre in Tulsa. If we're not paying attention to those stories, we're not paying attention to the lives that were lost. We're not paying attention to the descendants that are still with us. And so the work is always about truth-telling, healing, and transformation. And the work that we are participating in now is to make sure that we are addressing the church's role in racism and the very spaces in which it continues to play as a role of domination and denial. And so part of that is also holding our faith communities towards accountability, as well as the truth-telling process, as well as the healing from trauma, and the ways in which Black bodies, we are first people. That's part of the education. Our history was interrupted. It remained interrupted when we were transported during the transatlantic slave trade. And so the language we use also in the church must change. We were enslaved. We were never meant to be slaves. And so we are also working diligently to change the language, to move people out of denial around our history, as well as continue to lift up the stories, and not just on anniversaries, but we want the stories to be integral to how we are educating people within the Christian church 365 days a year, and create a calendar of these events so that people never forget.
Reverend Dr. Love, thank you so much for your powerful work and witness through the United Church of Christ. I love so many of the things that you said, especially so that people will never forget.
Thank you.
Again, reinforcing what we've heard from Michelle, Jacqueline, and Byron, the importance also of language, that African Americans were never meant to be enslaved. And so the power of language. One of the things I love about language is language has the capacity to direct us forward. And that's where I want us to look as we move towards the end of our conversation today. These last 3 questions are for Jacqueline, Michelle, and Byron as we look forward. As you hold your ancestors' legacies at the forefront, what do you want the future of Greenwood and Tulsa to look, feel, sound, and be like? What do you see for the future that you desire, especially when it comes to centering the well-being of descendants and ancestors of Greenwood and Tulsa?
I mean, oh, sorry, you can go.
No, go ahead, Byron.
I think when I think of what Lula would have wanted most from making the confectionery shop that she made and then continuing on to the Dreamland Theater, it's really about community, right? And it's so often framed in terms of capitalistic excellence and, oh, you have to be the biggest grinder and have the most money and get on top. But just getting on top of other Black people isn't Black excellence, right? So I feel like the key thing that we need to actually do looking forward is that sort of communal mindedness, and one that transcends the actual boundaries of our current economic system, right? So I think we need to look at Black empowerment in terms of our whole community having food on the table. How do we make that food? How do we support each other emotionally? Because Lula eventually died of trauma, right? It died of heartache and died of PTSD and all the things we, like we said in the film, have words for now and frames for now. But back then they just called heartbreaking craziness, right? So I think when we think of moving forward and what the Greenwood 2.0 would be, it would have to be transcendent of the lie of the American dream that we were told to keep us shackled and enslaved in a different way. So Black autonomy, Black empowerment for every single person, and Black love, Black radical joy.
Oh yeah, Byron and I were on the same page again. I was going to emphasize community. As he said, that we can get into the whole, economics and all that, but really a self-thriving community. That's what I see. And to let our children know through storytelling, pictures, films as these, that you come from excellence. You don't come from slaves. You come from Black excellence. And there needs to be more of that shown.
They both said it very well. Yeah, that sense of community. The reason why Greenwood was so successful is because the people were helping each other out. It wasn't enough for one to be successful. They wanted everyone to be successful. And until we get that back, that's the feel that we back to Greenwood to get that kind of back. So that's the sense that was there. There was economic prosperity, but there was that sense of community. And but I also think that we also have to be aware of the policies that impact the economics and understanding how are redistricting and urban renewal and gentrification and all of that, and those people that make those decisions, making sure we're galvanizing people to understand the impact that that does have on our communities as well. But yeah, Byron and Michelle summed it up incredibly well. It's that sense of community and truly Black love, if you want to just sum it up.
So I'm hearing a lot of work, and I'm hearing a beautiful and powerful vision. And I heard just right then Black love. And I think about that as kind of, for me, I think about that as the engine that kind of keeps it all moving. But I want to ask you all a little bit. Some might call it strength, some might call it resilience, some might call it something else. What do you call the thing that sustains you as you work towards and work with others in large and small ways that sustain you in making what you all just named possible and real for yourselves and also for future generations?
Personally, and I'm sure my sissy will concur, again, it seems like a very simple thing, but we come from a very long line of independent thinkers, not only independent thinkers, but Black female independent thinkers. And while it's a very difficult road, it's not easy. Um, it is definitely something that has helped me. And when I say independent thinking, I mean, if it's not the popular idea, no matter what, you support your brother or sister, no matter what. And that is, I think, the legacy that was left by our great grandmother. Um, she was definitely a supporter of her community. Even though she was a business owner, no one was below her, but also no one was above her in her mind.
Yeah, I think that I always refer to the kind of the resilience that we have to carry as kind of this beautiful burden. So the resilience is we know that we have it in us. And so that is like an honor to be a descendant of such strong, amazing people. But then it's also this kind of resilience that, you have to, you feel like you shouldn't be able to give up or stop because of the things that they endured and were able to accomplish during those times. So, so it is a beautiful burden. But one that I think is important, but I have to also catch myself sometimes in realizing it's okay to not be okay. And I think that actually working through this film has helped me a little bit with that. And talking about that more and not feeling like you always have to be perfect all the time, just because of if Leona Bell could do it then I should be able to handle anything right now. But there's still so many of the same challenges. And I think to Byron's point earlier, and like Michelle just said, unshackling ourselves from this ideal of what the American dream is and re-envisioning that and reliving that and reframing it to what will actually make another Greenwood, a Greenwood 2.0. I think that would be the way to get through that. But yeah, I think resilience is something that we need to try and pull ourselves away back from, because I think that resilience causes self-abuse sometimes because you don't feel like you're allowed to stop.
That part, absolutely, yes. I feel like I feel like that's something all of us share, Jacqueline and Michelle, and I think broadly is we see how our ancestors and our parents they tried so hard and they felt I think maybe that privacy that they didn't want to talk about comes from such a deep like trauma and wanting to be resilient and knowing that you might frankly break down if you actually share the whole heart of what you're feeling. And maybe it's about like redefining all of the resilience in a way that's more sustainable and healthy and soft for ourselves, because we've had to be so hard on ourselves for so long to just get through the day, right? And I think that's why I love things like the nap ministry online, and I love a lot of ways of reframing, like we're talking about the language we're using, reframing rest is not something laziness and all these stereotypes and stigmas that they want to put on us to just keep us in this machine that we didn't even want to be in the first place, right? So I think I hope that's a heart that we can all share, you know.
Powerful. So I'm hearing a will to support, allowing oneself to stop, the power of determination, and sustainability are some of the pieces that describe what keeps you going or ways to keep going. Finally, is there a call to action? We talked about what we want it to look like. We talked what maybe will help us sustain us in this work. Is there a call to action that you'd like to invite folks to join with you all there in Tulsa as well as around the country?
My only input on this is just find out who your policymakers are and know that your letters aren't thrown away. If you have something to say, you can write, and it's powerful.
Yeah, I'm always about my call to action is always know who the decision makers are. Like you have to know who's in your state legislature, who represents your district, understand how redistricting impacts your community tax wise. The one thing that always upsets me and I always want to highlight is that the current block of Greenwood, that particular area now, due to redistricting, it is still being abused because those tax dollars do not go to the community like North Tulsa, where the largest population of Blacks currently reside still, and probably the people that should be benefiting from the prosperity that's currently occurring on Greenwood. Those tax dollars are not going to that area due to redistricting. Those tax dollars are going to one of the wealthier zip codes. So it is still continuing. So with all of the the hoopla around everything and the things that are growing up there, it's because, it's so telling with the Reverend talking about the baseball field. We had the baseball field that was built there a few years before the Centennial. The baseball field was in another part of the city before, but then all of a sudden they decided to move it right there adjacent to Greenwood. And so all of that fluster of activity now, the people that in my mind should be benefiting from the most are not. So understanding how all of those things work together to impact the community is the call to action. Don't just wait for the presidential election. You need to know every time a judge is up for re-election, city councilor, mayors, everyone, and get into that. There are resources that will help you understand and parse through all of it. But it's so important, not just in Tulsa and Oklahoma, but in every city and state, that you understand that those things that happen at your state capital do directly impact what's happening in your household and in your community. So that is what my call to action would be, is to understand how all of these things work together, because history is trying to be erased and it will repeat itself if we are not forever vigilant.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline, Michelle, Byron, our community speakers, Dr. Love, Reverend Jones, folks who via video. We really appreciate how you all continue to hold up a lamp towards the ways in which we want to be able to move. We can move in many different ways, but this is a beautiful and powerful and constructive way. And I really appreciate how you all talked about and emphasized the importance of caring for oneself as a way to honor the ancestors as you carve out the future that they deserve as well as your communities deserve. Thank you so much for being with us, everyone. For those who have joined us this afternoon, you'll see a quick pop-up poll, which we encourage you to take. It'll pop up there in front of your screen. If you enjoyed today's discussion, we again encourage you to join Odyssey Impact's National Social Impact Campaign for the film by hosting a screening with your community, organization, or house of worship, or your workplace. In just a moment, you'll see on the screen, all screening hosts will have access to the film's digital screening toolkit, packed with resources for facilitating post-event discussions, like the reflection piece you see right there on the screen, now written by Dr. Itihar Toure. This brings us to a close of our event today. Again, we thank you for your time, your energy, and more than anything, your interest and commitment to joining the work of recognition and restoration. On behalf of Odyssey Impact, I offer you an enormous thank you to our esteemed panelists and special guests, and thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful afternoon and take good care.